We are 2 months into hurricane season and all is quiet over the next 10 days. One of the reasons why, if we expand the view this morning, is all the Saharan dust is coming off the coast of Africa. You can see the screenshot of the Atlantic Basin literally goes right westbound through the main development region, all the way through the Caribbean and ending up into the Gulf of Mexico. So we've got a lot of Saharan dust has just been inundating these little tropical African waves that come off the coast of Africa. And that is literally shutting down anything that's trying to develop really between now and to the end of the month. And if we look at the overall ensembles, it's actually hitting that as well. So if this is going through all the way through the first couple of days of August, and literally not one member of the European ensemble has any tropical storm development whatsoever. So it remains quiet literally over the next 10 days. Closer to home, it's all about the cooler air and the unusual northwest flow. So this is a northwest flow, typically what you get in the first couple of weeks of June, but this is late July. It's definitely rare to see something like this, and especially drifting all the way down into the Gulf Coast states. And we have a rare little cool front that went through and now is stalled. So it's literally keeping with the northwest flow, the cooler anomalies really infiltrating areas of the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. And along that stalled frontal boundary, you can actually see the deep tropical moisture that's just building into the Gulf of Mexico. Water content values are 2 to 3 inches per hour. And so with that storm, with that stalled cold front along this region, as we heat up in the afternoon, that's bubbling up the atmosphere and overturning it. And literally, typically in the summertime, you've got light steering current aloft, and that could lead to some isolated flash flooding. So it's one of those situations where your neighbor could pick up, 2 inches of rain, but 5 miles down the street, you get literally next to nothing. That's typically what happens in these type of situations in the middle of summer, especially with the dynamics happening right now. So if we expand the view and take a look at the 500 millibar, you can see there's just dominant ridge of high pressure that's just been locked over a good part of the Southwest, and they just continue to bake. In fact, this actually just expands even further all the way up into Idaho and Montana, literally up into Canada. But you can see the predominant northwest flow with that, that cooler anomalies drifting all the way down into the Gulf Coast states. So very unusual for this time of year, heading into what is typically now the hottest time of summer. Over the next 3 weeks, this is typically when you see, for the good part of the US, the hottest temperatures of the year. But it's also bringing down some of that smoke coming down from some of the wildfires they're dealing with in parts of the Pacific Northwest, as well as into Canada. So with the upper level winds and that northwest flow aloft, it's bringing some of the smoke into interior regions of Montana, back into Wyoming. I saw some pictures out of Colorado this morning. They had a lot of hazy skies with the sunrise this morning. That's drifting down into Nebraska through portions of Iowa, as well as into even as far south as Ohio, and it could drift even into Oklahoma, into Arkansas over the next day or two. So you got actually some Saharan dust that's moving in from Africa, and then you got some wildfires that are moving in from Canada, from the northwest. But further south, yeah, it's all about where that cold front is and tapping into that abundance amount of high water vapor content in the atmosphere, literally over 2 inches per hour, especially for those regions into central and south Texas, as well as into Louisiana, Mississippi and Alabama, as well as into the Carolinas here. They could experience some just tropical type downpours. This is not like a severe weather situation or anything like that, but it's almost something that you would see in some sort of tropical identity, formation. But nonetheless, it's having those deep tropical rains with all that abundance of moisture. I showed you some of the high, water vapor content there in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's really two areas of disturbed weather. It's first further north into the upper Great Lakes underneath that little vorticity, that's creating some lift for those areas into Minnesota, as well as into Wisconsin, back into portions of Michigan, into the northern interiors of New York as well. And then, of course, further south along that cool front, that's where you have most of the heavier rain showers. And you can definitely see over the next 24 hours, it's kind of feast or famine. So it's mainly along these coastal regions where they're going to pick up an abundance amount of rain. So yes, they do need it in areas of central Texas, but they definitely don't need it for those areas into the Houston area. And even along into Louisiana, Mississippi, they've had a ton of rain over the last couple of months. And these areas across the southeast, as well as into the Carolinas, back into areas of Delaware here. And then, of course, you have that little vorticity that's lifting the atmosphere and bringing out that scattered rain of anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain showers for the upper Great Lakes. But look at the temperatures, folks. Rare to see for this time of year. So yeah, it's nothing but the heat underneath that heat ridge and that heat dome. So if it's cooler one place, the heat's got to go somewhere, because typically this is the hottest time of the year. And everywhere you see the circled areas, that is record-breaking temperatures that are expected for tomorrow. Yeah, that's not a misprint, folks. That's 107 up there in Montana, while they're producing 80s all the way down into the Gulf Coast states. So very unusual. It's so unusual that anywhere in these squares, that is the record low maximum temperature. That is your high temperature for the day, not the low temperature. Sometimes back in Baton Rouge, that 82, that is when you wake up in the morning, typically in the morning hours, instead of the heat of the afternoon. So that tells you this atmosphere is pretty rare for this time of year nonetheless. So enjoy it while it lasts. And the rain showers are going to be abundance as well. So with that stalled cool front, we're still going to have to be dealing with that tropical type moisture over the next couple of days, and especially further along into the coastal regions. The closer you live along into the Gulf Coast, yes, you're going to be picking up even some flooding rains, unfortunately, literally from Texas all the way into areas of Maine. That's where the heavier rain amounts are going to be over the next couple of days. If we zoom in to some of these preliminary rain amounts between now and Saturday morning, you can actually see a couple of inches there in Corpus Christi, another 5 to maybe even 6 inches into Galveston. Obviously, they dealt with all barrels issue just over the last couple of weeks that had some double-digit totals for these same areas that are expected to get another 5, 6, 7 inches. And of course, they had a really wet spring, so really they don't really need the rainfall whatsoever. But unfortunately, they're going to get it in a big way, and obviously that's going to lead to some isolated flash flooding. And even further up the coast into the Carolinas, easily another 2, 3, if not almost 4 inches. And then we're in and around the Virginia Beach region, through Wilmington, as well as into Florence, Raleigh, Fayetteville. Those areas could get anywhere from 2, 3 to 4 inches between now and Saturday morning. But eventually, that cooler air and the northwest flow is going to break down. Of course, it's not going to last forever. We know that because it's the heat of the summer, and that ridge of high pressure that's been locked over a good part of the west is finally going to move further eastbound. And as it does, it's going to really start to elevate those temperatures for those areas that are really nice today. For areas like in the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, you're going to be starting to feel the effects of that heat ridge combined with the abundance amount of moisture. So yes, when the northwest flow starts to unwind, that southwest wind's going to be able to kick in, and ain't going to be anything to stop it. It's going to be lifting those elevated dew points all the way up into Canada, along with that ridge of high pressure. That's going to put the heat well to the north in almost near triple-digit temperatures of what it feels like for a good part of the Dakotas, Minnesota, and that heat ridge will likely expand and start shifting into the upper Great Lakes as well as into areas of New England, you know, as we head into the weekend. So as the northwest flow starts to subside, and as that cool front that is stalled out will start to kind of fade, obviously you'll have less moisture to be able to work with. So you'll still get some scattered showers during the daytime on Saturday and even into Sunday. But I think things do wind down as we head towards the end of the month, because that ridge of high pressure that's been locked over a good part of the West is going to be moving further east. So yes, those areas in the north get it first, but now the central and southern states are going to be able to get under that ridge of high pressure and closer to normal. Normal's like 97, well into the 90s. That definitely not the 80s, right? So then you'll eventually have those triple digit temperatures start to return for a good part of the south central region. So just enjoy the cooler anomalies, you know, while you have it. And yes, I think that even expands as we get into the month of August. Obviously, August is the hottest month of the year typically for a good part of the US, and nothing unusual with the heat ridge starting to build, not just for the West now, but we got no northwest flow to deal with. And as that ridge will likely move eastbound, it will expand. And as it expands, it's going to be able to heat up the atmosphere. So we've got widespread temperatures of excessive heat from moderate all the way to slight risk for really a good part of the U.S. is only those areas across the southeast that still have somewhat normal conditions. But everywhere else, you're definitely going to be feeling the heat in a big way. And of course, as the heat will expand, it will start to dry out. So yes, you are dealing with those elevated rain showers over the next couple of days across the deep south and much of the southeast and portions of the northeast. But as the northwest flow starts to wind down and as the ridge starts to expand, as we get into the weekend, that first couple of days of end of July, and then as we head into those first couple of days of August, yes, overall, a much drier period is going to set in for a good part of the U.S. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch my next update while I protect you before and after the storm.